ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. We'll just wait for 1 or 2 more minutes for everybody to join before we start. Uh, just from a logistical standpoint, the I am currently on at various platforms. We have a webinar which is on. The link of the webinar is on my timeline. You guys can click that link of the webinar if you want to join the webinar itself, wherein I can even take you on screen if you are comfortable, else you can even ask, interact there on the webinar itself. Plus, this Twitter space is open on my Twitter account as well, and people who want to just listen in from the Twitter space, they can join there, and then you'll be able to interact through the presentation and the discussion. I am expecting certain people to join as panelists, so we can have a more richer discussion. They can join as a panelist on the Twitter space, or they can even join on the webinar. That's up to them. With that being said, let's just quickly dive, into what I am going to present today. Um, so, what I'm going to present today is primarily what we call India's caste system. Okay. And so this is an oft repeated term that we hear. Caste system, Varnashram, and there's a lot of confusion around, what is actually caste, what is Varn, are they the same thing? And then, people who are actually know it and propagate the caste system, they try to, use these terms in different ways to kind of keep people confused and keep the caste system kind of going. So my idea of this presentation today is, hopefully, once you at the end of this presentation, no matter where you are from the world, you should be able to really understand what is the caste system, what are its origin, what are its scriptural, origins, or religious origins, or societal origins, and how it is practiced in Indian subcontinent as well as outside today across the globe. Because as the diaspora has expanded, the practice of caste system or caste per se has expanded globally. So, without further ado, I would say let's just dive deep into it. You guys can probably see my screen. Uh, this is the kind of a picture, kind of colonial era picture, because the British, when they came to India, they were really, I would say, flabbergasted seeing this, very systemic way of discrimination, or some called it racism, that was perpetrated, which was kind of unseen globally in any other society. And so they basically have this picture from that era. On the right hand side, you see some lower caste, and on the left hand side, kind of just representation, you see like some higher caste, rich people. So let's understand, to really understand caste system, you have to look at where it originated and the geography of that area. This is the Indian subcontinent, and as you can see, it's important to note, like, this whole area on the north that you see is like the Himalayan range, very high. Then there's a plateau called Tibet, and then the Himalayan range is kind of bend outside the area of Pakistan into Afghanistan, and kind of it almost forms like kind of a protective cup, around this whole Indian subcontinent. And inside this Indian subcontinent, there are these great plains of Punjab, then the great plains of Ganga Yamuna area that we call the cow belt. And then, you have the middle part of the subcontinent, and then there is, the southern part of the subcontinent. So over a period of time, this area has been inhabited by various tribes which came. If you can just look at the geography, you can make out that this kind of a area which is kind of slightly protected geographically by the ranges. Plus, if you look at the lat and long of this area, it's a very mild area from climatic perspective. Like, you can get crops through the year. You can survive without too much energy, waste of energy, and resources. So historically, this particular region has always carried almost like 25 to 30% of the world population. 20% at least of the world population, by the sheer fact that it is so suitable for human habitation. It's not too cold, not too hot. You can get crops all through the year. What else you need? Okay, so this is the geography of that area. This is the current political map of that area, and I kind of put it up to kind of give you guys a sense of that how diverse it is. It's not one. It looks like a one landmass, but in reality, that landmass comprises 29 to 30 different nations within itself. So it's like Europe. So if you can look at Europe's geographical map, looks simple, but when you really have to look at the political map, that where are these different nations of Europe, then you understand, where they are. This is like the Indian state, and within that the Indian states are demarcated. These states are kind of formed based upon language or almost of nationality. So in the north you have Kashmir, then you have Punjab, then in the south you have great nations of Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. These are nations in themselves. Somebody, a genetician, had kind of remarked that the amount of genetic diversity that you see in one village in India is kind of almost what you see in one full country in Europe. So these whole nations are kind of they developed over a period of a 2000 to 5000 year history. Each nation has its own language, its own culture. Within that nation, you have multiple different tribes, and those tribes have their own culture and own history, and sometimes even own subculture within the nation itself. So it's important to kind of understand, how diverse genetically and linguistically and from a nationhood perspective this whole subcontinent is. And it's important to keep it in mind that India is not a nation. Okay, sometimes people kind of look at the Indian state. India is basically a confederation. You can call it a forced confederation because it was created, this whole political unit was created by the British through subjugation of these multiple diverse nations. Okay. Now let's look at what is caste. So many people get confused by that caste and caste system. So slightly two different terms. One is a system and one is a caste. Caste, you can look at it. Let's look at Europe. Do we have caste in Europe? Caste, the way you can look at it, caste is it's like your surname. It's kind of a denotation of your tribal identity. Somebody has a caste name. Look at George W. Bush. He uses Bush as a surname. It kind of gives him some idea, what is his family tree, from where his ancestors came, etc., etc., etc. So caste is typically like a surname that you use, and you mostly generally associated with the tribe that you come from, because the society, 1,000, 2,000 year back, even today actually, but at least 1,000 year back or 2,000 year back was very tribal in nature. Like if you go to Germany, somebody, the most common username is Mueller. The other common username surname is Weber. In England, the most common is kind of Brown, White, and these other kind of surnames that you find. Adam is another common surname in UK. So that way, if you have to kind of say, is caste everywhere? Yes, everywhere, because it's kind of universal. You want to know, where you came from, who your maybe you want to have some connect with your ancestry. So it's a way of using that surname which gives you that connect. Over a period of time, the importance of that surname has gone down because those tribes have kind of vanished and become more cosmopolitan. But caste is everywhere in that sense. So this is caste. But what is caste system? So once we know that caste is kind of like everywhere, and but is it kind of evil? No, the caste itself is not an issue. But in India, there's a unique thing that was put in place, religiously ordained by some people, which is called the caste system, which is now using the caste and your surname and giving it a societal structure, giving it a system, a hierarchical system. It's a system of arranging castes in a hierarchical order, and each, wherever you are, wherever you fall in that order, your role, your responsibilities, your rights and duties get defined by your status in that hierarchy, or the status that is given to your caste or your surname in that hierarchy. It is decided by birth in this life, Once you are born, by at birth it is known that whether you are number one, number two, number four. But you can get, so you can't change it in this life. But as per the caste system or the people who propagated it, you can change it in the afterlife, the next life. Like suppose you do all your responsibilities that you were supposed to do as number three, and you never kind of wandered away from the duties that was wanted to you. That is good karma, and that karma can make you progress one level or sometimes even two level up in the next life. So this is what we call, in simple terms, caste system. I hope everybody is with me till now. And I have not seen anybody join on the webinar. If some people want to join on the webinar, will be great. And then, I can. Okay. So let's move to, what is the hierarchy like? So as I said, it's a system of organizing castes in a hierarchy. So this is a hierarchy in which the castes are organized by the Indian caste system. This caste system actually is an English name. The correct name for this is Varna Ashram. Varn system. So Varn is basically the one grade. Like Brahmins is a Varn, and your within Brahmins, what your surname is, it basically becomes your caste, and within that also you can get a subcaste. But at a high level, 45,000 feet view level, Varn is now one category, one arrangement of castes. Brahmins is one Varn, Kshatriyas is one Varan, Vaishyas is another Varan, Shudra is another one. So there are four Varans in the caste system. And then there is this what we call outcast is kind of the fifth Varan, but it's not a fifth Varan. It is basically the people who are outside the system. Anybody outside this system of four Varans is outcast. Um, so now on the top, it's because it's an hierarchy, it's organized like on the top, it's organized like a pyramid. It's not like a rectangle or anything else. And as you keep going up, the number of people on the top keep going low, and their rights kind of keep increasing and their duties kind of keep differing. And depending on where you are, each varan has very different roles in the society, very different rights, very different code that is applied to them. So the Brahmins are the ones who devised this system, are basically the ones who kind of wrote the original Dharam Shastra. Then we'll go to what Dharam Shastra is, and they put themselves quite conveniently at the top. Okay, so the Brahmins are and everybody else is actually supposed to serve the Brahman. So Brahman is like the epitome of the society, and other Varans serve Brahman. So Brahman is served by all three. And then below Brahmins is Kshatriya, and Brahmins are generally the priests. They are not supposed to work, and we'll go through what their roles and responsibilities are in next slides. And then after below that Brahmins comes the Kshatriyas. So if you're born a Kshatriya, then you are supposed to be like the warrior and the ruler or the land owner. And a Kshatriya is supposed to serve the Brahman, but not serve the people below him. The people below are supposed to serve him. And then Vaishya comes another Varan. So I'm deliberately using the term Varan. Okay, so we have to understand Vaishya is not a caste; it's a Varan. It's a category. Is all the castes which are put in this category are basically merchants, the traders, the businessmen, and then they kind of fall under this category Vaishya. And the last one is Shudra. Uh, Now this image in Shudra, if you see, I have written farmers, herders, manual worker. It is slightly incorrect. Actually, the farmers and herders, I just picked it up from the internet, but I know the Dharam Shastra, so I should have picked up a better picture. The farmers and herders in the most prominent, in some Dharam Shastra put farmer and herders in Shudra, but the most major one puts farmers and herders also in the Vaishya category. And Shudra is basically, whatever is left in the society goes get born as Shudra. The first three Varans are called twice born, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, and the Shudra is called single once born or single time born. And then outside, everything goes into the outcast. The outcasts are definitely, we'll when we go to how they are supposed to be treated, usually the outcasts are untouchable. You can't even touch them. Even Shudra, you can't even touch in many conditions, and they are like the lowest. But they are given a separate. They have a caste. The outcasts don't even have any varna. The Shudras have a Varan. Generally, the outcasts were people like, who were not living either in civilization. They were like tribals who will live in off the forest, of the fruits of the forest, or live off the land. Those were the people, or chandals, people who will work with dead bodies. They or people who will work with human waste. They were identified as outcasts. So this is the hierarchy that the Indian caste system ordains, and I kind of keep want to remain it. This is caste system. Being a Brahman is not a caste. Brahman is a category, a Varan. Kshatriya is a Varan. Vaishya is a Varan. Shudra is a Varan, and you can, depending upon your surname and what Varan they are assigned, you get assigned a Varan at the time of birth. And these Varan are assigned generally as per occupation. But once you get into that occupation, like suppose I am a merchant, I'm a Vaishya, my son or daughter will be a Vaishya, and then their occupation will be fixed. They'll have to be Vaishya. They'll have to do the same business. They cannot just decide, okay, I am born a Vaishya and now I want to become a Kshatriya. No, 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 that's not allowed in the one system. So what they can do is they want to get themselves promoted into Kshatriya Varan. Then they really have to all their life follow all their duties and responsibility as Vaishya. And if they do that, then in the next birth, they will. It is promised that they will get born one level up, which is Kshatriya. That is how, because the Brahmanism believes in like birth and rebirth and continuous cycle like this. Basically, you get promotion in the next birth, not in this birth. Okay, so just to keep that in mind, and we'll go through the religious side of it. So to understand, what is the where does this whole caste system came from? This caste system primarily is religiously ordained, as I said. It could have originated outside religion, but it primarily takes its authority from the religious scriptures of Brahmanism. I'm deliberately not using the term Hinduism because Hinduism is a very, very new term, which got popular, I would say, in last 100 years. But the whole system of this scriptures that we will currently quote were called actually Brahman scriptures. And Brahmans are, as we in the last slide saw, they are the ones or the caste which have declared themselves to be on the topmost. Conveniently, I would say. So, in the Brahmanic scriptures, there are four Vedas. These are four, Vedas like Rig Ved, Yajur Ved, Samar Ved, Sam Ved. These Veds are basically hymns, and if you read them, they have generally each Ved have three or four different parts. Rig Veda is considered the oldest. You can find their copies online. Some Veda is more like have hymns in praise of different gods. Some Veda will focus on rituals, etc., etc. Outside four Vedas, there are 18 Mahapuranas. Mahapuranas are like, kind of history of the gods, like there'll be Mahapurana, like a Shiv Mahapurana. In the Shiv Mahapurana, the entire, the eulogy of the Shiv god will be sung, and how Shiv was created, what is his role in universe, etc., how he got married, which all different human forms he took. So these are stories about the gods and their lives, and what they do, and what they have not done. So there are 18 Mahapuranas, and the highest one is considered as Shiv Mahapuran. And you can get a copy of it, and I'll show you some of them as we go through it. There are two epics outside this. These are Mahabharata and Ramayana. Now, many of the people claim these are all plagiarized by the Brahmins. They don't actually belong to Brahmanas, but they plagiarize it from the Jain stories. But that's fine. That's a different story. But today, like, there are two epics which are considered to be part of Brahmanism, which is Mahabharata and Ramayana. Okay, and the last one, and the most important one, okay, is the Dharma Shastra and Dharma Shustra. There is a Dharma Sutra. There is a small technical distinction between the two. It is based upon which scriptures these are based upon, but this is basically the jurisprudence. So Vedas only has hymns. Puranas only has stories. Epics is also a story, like this big epic story, but they don't have laws. They will not tell you. You might get some incidents that a Shudra was treated this way, a Kshatriya is supposed to be one line somewhere, but it is not a body of law. It is not like a criminal procedure code. So Dharma Shastra is basically the jurisprudence or the law for the society derived based upon Vedas, Puranas, and epics. That is Dharma Shastra. So people who are familiar with Islam, I think that will ring a bell. This is exactly like what the system you have in Islam. You have Sharia in Islam. Sharia is basically Islamic jurisprudence. So Sharia law is derived based upon Quran and seen in the light of Hadith, or Hadith seen in the light of Quran, and interpreted as what a human being should live his life. What are the rights, roles, and responsibilities of a woman? What are the rights, role, and responsibility of man? How should divorce happen, marriage happen, etc., etc., etc. So this is exactly like this. And as we'll go through some of these dharma shastras, you will see if you put them across um, Islamic jurisprudence like Sharia, you will see like, oh, it's kind of reads the same because the concept is same. I won't say they were written by the same person, but you almost get like an impression if you are a reader of both. Oh, they seem very identical, almost as if the same guy has written it. But we'll talk about the Islamic school of jurisprudence and how they differ or how much similar they are to the Brahmanic school of jurisprudence, which is Dharma Shastra. Now, the Dharma Shastra have been written by many top scholars in Brahmanic literature. The highest, so you will not get one Dharma Shastra. There are multiple Dharma Shastras, but the one which is considered the highest and the most important is the one written by Manu Smriti and Manu Ved Manu, and his name and the Dharma Shastra is called Manu Smriti. And so this Manu Smriti, or this book of law, is the highest. Like, it has the highest authority. So if Manu Smriti says something, Manu Dharma Shastra says something, and there's another Dharma Shastra which provides a different ruling, then Manu prevails. And within Manu Smriti also there is a system of deciding if there's a conflict. Let us say in Vedas there is an example that a Shudra has done X, but in Mahapurana there is an example that Shudra has not been allowed to do that X. So then how do you decide? So Manusmriti is then kicks in, and Manusmriti is the one which actually gives the final judgment that okay, this is how you resolve the difference. And it has a full system of logic. Okay, if Veda is contradicted versus Purana, whether Ved will prevail or Puran will prevail, or epic will prevail, or something else will prevail in that situation. And within that, Manu is the highest, and Manu Smriti is even higher than Vedas. So if something is contradicted, Manu Smriti contradicts Veda, then Manu Smriti prevails over Veda, because it is assumed that you are reading the Veda wrong. So Manu cannot be wrong. Manu is the highest saint in Brahman, I would say not folklore, but like the Brahmanical system. So that is why Manu is also adored a lot. He is his statue you will find in Indian Parliament. You will find in Rajasthan High Court there is a big statue of sage Manu which is constructed. So for Brahmins, Manu is like the all and end all. And people who are familiar with Islam, you will understand, like in Islam as well. Yes, there is Quran, but in reality, at the end, what matters is the Sharia, and it matters more because it tells you exactly how to live your life. Quran you can read, once in a day, but how to lead your life is coming from the jurisprudence school. And even in Islam, you will see there are like four schools of jurisprudence: Shafi, Hanbali, etc., etc. And same way in Brahmanical system, there are multiple dharmashastras, but the highest one is Manu Smriti. Sometimes people will confuse, oh, this Dharma Shastra is a Samriti, it is not a Shruti. So they try to confuse using this word just to give you a sense what is Smriti and Shruti. Shruti is something that is revealed. So Vedas are Shruti. So they were revealed by God Himself. And Samriti is something that was remembered. Somebody told somebody and you remembered. They were also God's law, but they were written by a sage from God laws and was handed over from generation to generation. That is Samriti. Same way, like Quran is revealed, but the Hanafi school, the books that of jurisprudence are Sharia based upon Quran. So this is how the whole system, in nutshell, a high level, the main scriptures of Brahmanism are, and people can kind of read them further. Okay, let's now dive deep into what does Manusmriti say in terms of Raita. Let's first talk about what it says about the origin of Varna system. So in Manusmriti, it is where you actually get how the creation came into being. So Sage Manu talks about how all these Vishnu was created, Brahma was created, and all the on this day night was created. On that day, light was created. So he will talk about all things, how the five elements were created, etc., etc. Pretty much like the stories sometimes you find in Bible and even in Quran, like the creation. It's a whole chapter. It's in chapter 1 itself, and within chapter 1, then he talks about how these four varnas were created. So then they talk about, and you can read it, the Sanskrit version as well, and you can read the English version. And this is chapter 1, volume 1, chapter 1. But for the sake of the prosperity of the worlds, and I'm quoting right now, Manu, but for the sake of the prosperity of the worlds, he caused the Brahmana, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Shudra to proceed from his mouth, his arms, his thighs, and his feet. So basically, he's saying the Brahman came from the mouth, the Kshatriya came from the arms, they are the soldierly side, the Vaishya from the thighs because they do most of the work, and the Shudra from the feet because the job of the Shudra is to serve all the other Varnas. So this is the origin of these Varnas in the scriptural sense. And then, they talk about the duties, and then I'm reading the left one first. But in order to protect his universe, he, the most resplendent one, assigned separate duties and occupations to those who sprang from his mouth, arms, thighs, and feet. And their duties are separate. People duties and their occupations are going to be decided by what varna they are born in. And then I'm reading the second page. The Kshatriya he commanded to protect the people. Okay, before going there, let's look at what he says about Brahmins. To Brahmins, he assigned teaching and studying the Veda, sacrificing for their own benefit and for others, giving and accepting of alms. Here, sacrificing is the ritual sacrifice. So if you read the Vedas, the Brahmanical literature is basically very, very sacrifice based. So they're like sacrifice for everything. Like all kind of animals can be sacrificed. There's actually one way which has some element of human sacrifice as well. So horse has to be sacrificed, all kind of animals. So this is that sacrificing it's talked about. The Kshatriya he commanded to protect the people, to bestow gifts, to offer sacrifices, to study the Veda, and to abstain from attaching himself to sensual pleasures. And then I'll continue reading. To Vaishya, to tend cattle, to bestow gifts, to offer sacrifices, to study the Veda, to trade, to lend money, and to cultivate land. So Vaishya is all the businessmen, traders, farmers. They can also study Veda. And then for Shudra, one occupation only the Lord prescribed to the Shudra, to serve meekly even these other three castes. So the Shudra's only and only job is to serve meekly. So, and outcast is, not even to be considered, not even allowed in the society. And then let's talk about, the big aspect of caste system. Actually, the discrimination thing starts from the concept of monogamy itself. So monogamy is a big thing for one system. Like you just cannot mix up the caste any which way. So and so in verse after verse, chapter after chapter, it is reiterated. For adultery, he caused for by adultery and this is like I think chapter. Just one sec. I will just stop a bit. Okay. Sorry, I had to calm down the chaos in my home. So you guys might have been getting some background noise. But anyways, so let's continue. So this verse I think comes from chapter. This is volume 2 and chapter. I have this Manusmriti here, and I'll kind of give you. It's chapter 9. And it says, for by adultery is caused a mixture of caste, varna among men. Hence follows sin, which cuts up even the roots and the cause of destruction of everything. So adultery is a big thing, as well as marriage between the different castes. You will see there are like verse after verse is kind of. So we'll continue on adultery, and I'll read from left to right. This will give you a sense, what kind of different roles, responsibilities, rights are kind of prescribed as per the Varna, and depending upon what crimes you commit. So a man who is not a Brahman ought to suffer death for adultery. For the wives of all the four castes even must always be carefully guarded. So say if a non-Brahman does adultery, then their punishment should be death. Brahman can never be given death punishment. You will see that verse after verse. A Brahman is never to be given capital punishment ever. And then he says mendicant bards men okay who perform the initiatory ceremony of a Vedic sacrifice and artisans are not prohibited from speaking to married women. Let no man converse with the wives of others after he has been forbidden to do so, but he who converses with them in spite of a prohibition shall be fined one suvarna. This is for twice born. This is not for Shudra. Okay, we'll talk about what the punishment is for Shudra. If a Shudra talks to the wife of a higher caste. This rule does not apply to the wives of actors and singers, nor of those who live in the intrigues of their own, for such men send their wives to others or concealing themselves allow them to hold criminal intercourse. So this rule does not apply for people who basically let their woman be, do some other work. Not to kind of use that word. Yet he who secretly converses with such woman or with female slaves kept by one master. So slavery was there always, in Brahmanical system, and it was permitted, it was practiced. With female slaves kept by one master and with female ascetics shall be compelled to pay a small fine if you converse. He who violates an unwilling maiden shall instantly suffer corporal punishment. But a man who enjoys a willing maiden shall not suffer corporal punishment if his caste be the same as hers. So if like a lower caste does does mate with somebody from a higher caste, then it's corporal. If it is the same level, no. From a maiden who makes an advance to a man of high caste, he shall not take any fine. But her who courts a man of lower caste, let him force to live confined in her house. A man of low caste who makes love to a maiden of highest caste shall suffer corporal punishment. Okay. Any Varna man, whether he's Kshatriya or somebody, if he ends up sleeping with the Brahman woman, then punishment is death. He who addresses a maiden of equal caste shall pay the nuptial fee if her father desired. But if a man, through insolence, forcibly contaminates a maiden, two of his fingers shall be instantly cut off, and he shall pay a fine of 600 pounds. Here it is basically forcibly touch a maiden, like a maiden, then the fingers are to be cut off. A man of equal caste who defies a willing maiden shall not suffer the amputation of finger, but shall say a small fine. A damsel who pollutes another damsel must be fined 200 panas, pay the double of her nuptial fee, and receive 10 lashes with a rod. But a woman who pollutes a damsel, a woman is a married woman, obviously, if the pollutes a damsel, shall instantly have her head shaved off, two fingers cut off, and be made to ride through the town on a donkey. If a wife, proud of the greatness of her relative or her own excellence, violates the duty which she owes to her lord, basically she makes her husband unhappy, the king shall cause her to be devoured by dogs in a place frequented by many. So if you are not a good wife, you will be you will be eaten live by dogs. Um, let him, okay, okay, this one I let me just read. Okay, yeah. Let's read this one. A Shudra. Now, what is the punishment if a Shudra does that? A Shudra who has intercourse with a woman of a twice born caste, that is anybody higher up than him, guarded or unguarded, shall be punished in the following manner. If she was unguarded, he loses the part. Basically, his penis and testicles are to be cut off, and all his property. So, and if she was guarded means married, everything, even his own life. For intercourse with a guarded Brahmani, a Vaishya shall feed all his property after imprisonment for a year. A Kshatriya shall be fined 1,000 panas and be shaved with the urine of an ass. So this is, see, if you can kind of make out, the punishments that you are given are kind of based upon, what your Varna is. I have a very nice actually Twitter thread on this. When the Britishers came to, India, then when they encountered these, different caste system, they basically then collected all the highest Brahmins in Bengal and asked them to write, the agreed upon Hindu code or Hindu law, or the Brahman Law. And that book was compiled in 1776 at Fort Williams, and it was called a Code of Gentoo Laws. And then the British tried to basically they had recently taken over Bengal, which was majorly Hindu, so or Brahmanical in that sense, and they wanted to basically not change the law systems too much. So they basically collected all these pandas and basically made up this body of laws which are called Gentoo laws. So just to give you a sense, what were there in the Gentoo laws? These laws reflect the casteist pro-Brahmin bias even of the Muslim rulers, because the Muslim rulers also had the same policy of allowing Hindus to govern themselves with the Brahmanical law. So here is how the interest worked in that system. A Shudra having to pay 5 times the interest chargeable to a Brahman. A Kshatri 3 times, a Vaishya 2 times. Okay. So I'm going to just read it. If a loan is to be granted to a man of Kshatriya caste, in that caste where a Brahman pays interest of 1 rupee, the Kshatri shall pay 1 rupee 8 annas. When the Brahman is charged, where the Brahman is charged 1 rupee 2 annas, his interest shall be 1 rupee 11 annas. So basically, even the interest, a Brahman will be lower and the Kshatri will be higher. And here is that, a Brahman can never be given uh, a death penalty for whatever crime. So it's kind of strictly prohibited in the Brahmanical scriptures. Slavery is permitted, at there at different places. It is kind of in all the Dharma Shastras you will find a mention of that slavery is okay. um, a Brahman can make a Shudra a slave even if he has not purchased the Shudra. And for generally, you to own a slave, you have to buy a slave. But a Brahman can make a Shudra a slave even without having to pay the price. If a Shudra, defaulted in any, service, or made Brahman, angry or about something, a Shudra can end up being a slave, even without having gotten the price. Okay, so then I'll kind of talk about other penalties if you see. If a Shudra makes false accusations against any higher caste, his tongue shall be cut off and hot iron thrust into his mouth. Other castes should only get a fine. Then the other laws were, if somebody even says that a Brahmin is not a Brahman, he should also be fined heavily. I'll read that exact text of that code. It says, if a man should say of a Brahman that this man is not a Brahman, or of a Kshatri that this man is no Kshatri, or in such manner should speak reproachfully of any caste, in that caste the magistrate shall fine him 200 pennas of codis. Okay, if a person strikes a Brahman with any of his limb or limbs, then all those limbs used to strike the Brahman should be cut off. If a man strikes a Brahman with his hand, the magistrate shall cut off that man's hand. If he strikes him with his foot, the magistrate shall cut off the foot. In the same manner, with whatever limbs he strikes a Brahman, that limb shall be cut off. But if a Shudra strikes either of the three castes, Brahman, Kshatriya, or Vash, with his hand or foot, the magistrate shall cut off such hand or foot. If a Shudra sits on the carpet of a Brahman, then a hot iron must should be thrust into his buttock, and he should be branded and banished from the kingdom. Else, his entire buttock should be cut off. Other caste will just pay a fine if they do the same mistake. I'll just read the exact text. If a Shudra sits upon the carpet of a Brahman, in that case, the magistrate having thrust a hot iron into his buttock and branded him shall banish him from the kingdom. Okay, and if okay, there is some absurd, thing. There it is, what it is. The time period was such. If a Shudra discharges odor from his back towards the Brahmin, his anus shall be cut off. So if a Shudra even dares to create, foul smell around a Brahman, I'll just read exactly how that code ran. It said, if a Shudra out of pride should spit his phlegm upon a Brahman's body, the magistrate shall cut off his lip. And if a Shudra pisses upon a Brahman's body, the magistrate shall cut off his penis. And if he should evacuate backwards his wind upon a Brahman's body, the magistrate shall cut off his fundament, which is basically, his anus. Okay, and a Shudra committing adultery with the consent of the lady should have his penis and testicles cut off. He should be binded up a hot plate, and then burned alive. A Brahman committing the same crime should only be fined or his hair will be cut off. Again, for adultery, if the wife of a Brahman commits adultery with a Shudra or any other caste, she should be stripped naked, paraded naked through the town on an ass, and then be fed to dogs alive. A Brahman indulging in bestiality should be fined, but a Shudra doing the same act should be put to death. So, as I said, the most heinous kind of punishments for a Shudra were reserved, in these codes. And then, when even the British came, any magistrate, if he was supposed to give a ruling, he was supposed to have a Brahman by his side. So, a magistrate should always have a Brahman by his side while hearing any case between the two parties. While examining a witnesses, a magistrate should use soft civil words to address a Brahmin witness, but use harsh words along with the threat of punishment while taking down statement from a Shudra or a Vash. If a Kshatri or a Vash takes sannyas and then revert to normal way of life, they should be made a slave. A Brahman doing the same mistake should be marked on the forehead and banished from that kingdom. And then, if you look at it, there's a lot you can go through that thread. I'll kind of implement it. And let's go back to the PPT again. So 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 this is how this whole system kind of worked and was practiced actually. So I showed you the Gentoo laws, so you get a sense that this is not just bookish. This was actually in practice. Even in the early times of British period, they slowly realized, once they gained more control, and specifically when they took over Punjab, where they saw that there is no there was caste discrimination, but not to the extent that it was in the cow belt. They basically started making reforms, or at least made good efforts to reduce the impact of this gross discrimination that was going on. But anyways, who are the top ideologues? Are there people who promote this system still or in past? You will be surprised. Who is the biggest ideologue of the caste system or Varna system? Let me pull up his picture, and many of you will probably not believe what I'm going to show you, but go ahead and have a look. This gentleman on whether I don't know whether I need to do the gentleman. The picture that you see, Karamchand Gandhi is the topmost modern day ideologue or promoter of Varna Ashram, or what we just talked about, the Indian or Brahmanical caste system. And if you don't believe me, the only thing you have to do is go ahead and read what he has written. Okay. So this is collected works of Gandhi, and I'm just reading what this is Gandhi's own words. And here he says, "Varnas are just four and not numerous. They have been sanctioned by the Shastras. Whether or not people are conscious of them, they do exist all over the world as we see. There are everywhere these four classes: one to impart knowledge of God for the welfare of the world, another to protect the people against manifold dangers, a third one to carry the work of farming, etc. To sustain the community, and one class to work for these three classes. There is no feeling of high and low in this division, but since this is not understood as a great law of nature, there has been confusion in it. That is, these four functions are no more confined to the respective varnas. Instead, men have been taking occupations left, right, and center." So he basically complains a lot about, people are not following the varnashram. And this is all Gandhi. Society should not allow social mobility or change of profession, as per Gandhi. And he basically states that the British have caused confusion in society by allowing people to pick up any profession they like based on selfishness and greed. And in his view, once Varnashram is reinstalled, then India will retain its lost glory. So, quote unquote, I'll just quote Gandhi here himself and read it. He says, quote, "Instead, men have been taking up any occupation they choose with a view to achieving their selfish ends. At one time, India people used to consciously follow this law, basically Varnashram, and thus lived in peace. One accepted the calling of his own Varna and was satisfied in its pursuit for general welfare. There was no unhealthy competition among people to jump from one Varna to another for the sake of money or fame. At present, this insignificance of the one system seems to have disappeared. Even in India, destructive competition is on the increase. Everyone takes liberty of following any profession, and the meaning of Varna has been restricted to unnatural and meaningless restrictions on intermarriage and interdining. And that is why the country has stopped progressing. Hinduism will once again shine forth if such senseless restrictions are abolished and the pristine Varna system is re-established. This is Karamchand Gandhi. Okay. And in Karamchand Gandhi of Varna system, there will be no injunction on intercaste marriage. However, he says that endogamy will be a natural outcome as people would tend to marry within their class. Okay. So read how cleverly he puts it up. He says, in Varnashram, there was and should be no prohibition of intermarriage or interdining. Prohibition there is of change of one's hereditary occupation for purpose of gain. The existing practice is therefore doubly wrong in that it has set up cruel restrictions about interdining and intermarriage and tolerates anarchy about choice of occupation. And then he says, if the law of Varnashram was observed, there would naturally be a tendency, so far as a marriage is concerned, for people to restrict the marital relations to their own Varna. This is Karamchand Gandhi saying. He's saying, impose a restriction of what occupation you can take. Your occupation should be decided by your birth and your Varna. And then he said, we don't have to put any restriction on intermarriage. That will happen automatically. Because why would somebody want to marry outside his own occupation? so, so he's not catching the, he's not enforcing endogamy, with this way, but he's trying to catch the ear from that other side. Okay. This is Karamchand Gandhi, so-called, people call him father of the nation. He might be your father, not mine. Okay, and this is Karamchand Gandhi, and I just to reiterate, this is his collected works of Gandhi, and you guys can refer it. There are big tweets I have written on this. And then he says about untouchability. What was his view? So around untouchability, he basically says that people can practice untouchability if they want. For example, if a higher caste Hindu visits your house, you should have to let him know that the lower caste of cook, server, and any. Okay, I think this is slightly cut off. Let me try to bring the tweet up here. Unfortunately, that image is cut off, but I'll just read it up for you guys. That's okay. So basically, he says you can practice untouchability, but it is a choice. Like it should not be forced. Like if somebody wants to practice, they can practice. It's their personal choice. Okay, so he says if you have a bhangi working at your home and there's a guest coming over to your house, and you should basically let the bhangi know that the guest is going to feel offended. So you should not serve that guest because he's the higher caste. I will serve myself this guest because this guest practices untouchability. Once you tell bhangi this, then the bhangi will not mind, because you have told the bhangi. And then the guest will also not mind because the guest's choice has been respected. The guest wanted to practice untouchability, and you have not kind of, So these are the kind of, ridiculous solutions I would say he used to find out. So in 1935, there's an incident when, high caste, and this is the incident after which actually Dr. Ambedkar basically declared that he's going to leave, this religion and become a Sikh. And he made the famous statement, that I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. So in 1935, this was that incident. It happened in village Kavita. In 1935, when a high caste residents of village Kavita did a social boycott of untouchable for demanding that untouchable kids also study in the same school as their kids, there was a huge ruckus. What happened was these high caste people they boycotted these untouchables. And the untouchables said, no, we are going to have our kids study in the same school. So it caused a kind of a standoff. And there was a talk about it all through the country. So you know what Karamchand Gandhi's solution was? He gave a solution that the Harijans should leave that place. They should leave that village and move to another village, and the government should help them set up this very nice village somewhere else. Because they are not wanted. Why do they want to live among people who don't want them? Quite convenient, huh? Quite fair, I would say. Okay. So these are somehow you can go through this tweet. There are more examples of what Gandhi's views are, on Varna system. He was actually the greatest proponent of Varnashram. That is why he was also declared the father of the nation. So before we go to question and answer, what are the FAQs? Some people are, do Vedas provide separate laws than Manu Smriti and Dharma Shastra? No. The Dharma Shastras are the topmost lawgiver, and within that, Manu Smriti is the topmost law giver, and Vedas cannot provide separate law. And if there is a conflict, The Dharma Shastra actually provide you the system through which you can resolve that conflict. And Dharma Shastra finally prevail when it comes to the laws. Does Manusmriti or Dharma Shastra supersede Vedas? Yes, in the sense when it comes to jurisprudence and what the law should be. Is caste system practiced in America? The oft repeated question. Yes, the caste system is practiced in America because there are people who have moved from India to America. So it is not practiced in the strict sense the way these now scriptures are written, but the caste system based discrimination is openly practiced in America, and there are multiple examples. People will not hire, somebody from a different caste. People will typically not even marry, especially if somebody is a lower caste. I have seen a company, and I can name it. Hopefully, someday some legal action is taken against it, which was full of Tamil Brahmins, and everybody, from top to bottom, only hired Tamil Brahmins. And if you do a survey, you will find 60% of the people are Tamil Brahmins, and they will not hire anybody. And this is right here in America. So this, evil, I would say, practice has come to America, and I would say even to Europe, just by the fact that so many people from subcontinents has moved into this area. And do people still promote Varnashram? Oh yeah. So, so quite actually, it's quite. You'll be amazed that people even till openly not only promote, they want to force it through constitution. In India, like they are now talking about the Hindu Rashtra, which is basically nothing but basically putting Varnashram back into practice. The father of Indian nation, we call, they call, Karamchand Gandhi. He is the biggest proponent. So there is open propagation going on. The question is, should we it be banned to promote Varnashram? I would say yes. Why would you allow? Would you allow anybody, Ku Klux clan today to kind of go around and promote that blacks are inferior, don't give them this right, that right? If that is not allowed, then why is somebody allowed to, propagate Manusmriti or promote it, or the Varnashram? I think it should be totally banned in any society. Okay, with that, my presentation is over. I didn't get any any what you call speakers today. But if anybody wants to ask a question, they can ask for a speaker and ask me a question, and we can have a brief discussion before closing. And you guys can join, while on the webinar as well, or you can ask for a speaker. Here. Does anybody need any speaker? Just request the speaker if you want. Okay, while the requests are coming in, let's just wrap it up. So this is, in nutshell, what I talked about the caste system. Let me pull up that image again. Uh, Hope and kind of just revise this a bit so people understand the difference between caste and caste system. As I talked about, a caste is basically, in a simple term, your surname. Like, and you see that everywhere. It's kind of a denotion of your ancestry, your tribal ancestry, where you come from. But a caste system, or varna ashram, that we call caste system, is basically varna ashram. You have put caste in a systemic hierarchical order. That is what is called caste system. But its correct word is varna ashram. Is basically, now you arrange caste in these categories based upon birth, and your roles, duties, responsibilities, rights, punishments are destined by the varn in which you are born. The category varn, you can look at it like a Uber category in which you are born. The topmost varn, self-appointed is Brahmins. They are roughly, you might ask, like, what percentage of population? How is the population distributed on this pyramid? It's kind of like this, 3 to 5% of the population in the subcontinent are Brahmins, and then Kshatriya slightly higher, maybe 10 to 15. Then maybe 40-50% is Vaishya, and the rest is Shudra and outcast. So basically, the lower castes are the majority, and the top castes, select few who kind of, so 3% looks like a small number, but imagine 3% of 1.5 billion. So we are talking about how much? We are talking about around 45 million people. So that's not a small number. 45 million people who, who get to enjoy the fruits of being Brahmins, or like on the top of this hierarchy tree. It's not a small number actually. And how many are outcasts? That will go in, like, I don't know, 700, 800 million people, Shudra and outcasts. And not a small number either. And yeah, it's a very, in my personal view, this is the type of system which got propagated in dark ages, which is fine. Not fine, but it is what it is. But in the modern society, we have to get around it. We cannot let such ideologies and systems be still be propagated. We should study them. We should not just start burning books. We should study those books and understand where the society went wrong, and how we can avoid falling under this trap of Varnashram again. But what is happening in India is quite reverse actually. Rather than learning from these mistakes and saying it was a mistake, we shouldn't deploy Varnashram. What I'm seeing in India is like a reverse kind of a regressive mindset has prevailed in, where Brahmins, who still are, in the elite segment, they are privileged to kind of continue their privilege. They are still kind of propagating it. And because they are the elite section of the society, and they are able to kind of get away with it, and they have successfully brainwashed Kshatriyas and Vaishyas into kind of being their foot soldiers in rejuvenating the Varnashram. And I showed you the biggest ideologue of that is, Karamchand Gandhi. So, so the Varna system was on decline under the British rule. That is correct. But when the British left, I think there is a resurgence of it in the guise of Indian nationalism or Hindu nationalism. It's one and the same thing. And I think this is not just a issue for people of the subcontinent. Now it has become a problem for the world itself, the society, the human society at large. So it is high time that we as humans realize that this is an evil, should be stopped, and put an end to it. With that being said, I have not received any speaker request. So if no speaker request comes in next 10 seconds, we are going to close this presentation. Okay, going. Nobody wants to ask a question. Okay, no worries. I know most of the people here are from the subcontinent. They themselves are probably perturbed by this, but just want to highlight there's no harm in having a surname, but definitely there is a evilness or intrigue, or you are not on the right side if you believe in Varnashram or hierarchy and discrimination. Have your surname, but don't discriminate. With that, thank you very much. ਤੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਚਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਨਾਨਕ ਨਾਮ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਭਾਣੇ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ